It's a real shame that DLC is such a dirty word these days. Conceptually, it's a knockout, since the idea of being able to pay a bit more money to access more exciting game to play is something that would likely appeal to most people. You have to remember that when consumers are treated with half an iota of respect, you end up with exciting DLC releases that transform existing content into something completely different that fully justifies a separate release. Suddenly it's like, whoa, DLC can be good? Yeah, just not often. The PR on DLC is a lot of work, because despite it being such an inviting concept, it's been abused so much in the past that it's become such a distorted term that carries so much pain and suffering with it these days. So here I am making a video about the worst DLCs, and I'm sitting here thinking, most of them? DLC is hardly unsalvageable, but I feel like a lot of developers don't try very hard to paint DLC as anything other than an optional excuse to spend more money, which very often isn't all that optional at all. At the end of the day, the aim of DLC should be to make everyone feel a little better about themselves, that their favourite game actually has more content than they first thought, like finding a leftover slice of pizza in a box that you're about to throw away. Except that most of the time you need to pay extra to eat that pizza, and sometimes it's not quite as satisfying as you like. Or maybe you're paying extra for the pizza to be a different colour, or maybe you're paying more money to complete an incomplete pizza. Listen, I've done this for years. I can run a metaphor into the ground and into the core of the fucking earth until it doesn't mean anything anymore. Just like downloadable content in 2019. I turned that one round, didn't I? Few genres make DLC look as effortless as fighting games. It's just such an easy path that's been trodden by countless other games before, where you can't really go wrong as long as you don't do anything too psychotic. What do you need more of in a fighting game? Characters, of course, you dolt, since that's basically the only thing that people care about in these games, and if your fighting game doesn't have big names or exciting designs that people will gravitate towards, you're gonna have a rough time with DLC. Although I guess you can go down the Smash Bros route of throwing darts at a collection of headline acts and seeing whatever kind of scarcely believable character roster you end up with. Yes, I will pay money for that. I'd tear chunks of my soul out for that. Which is helpful, because I think that's what Capcom did when Street Fighter X Tekken got around to releasing its DLC. It's an exciting crossover game like Smash Bros, and so its DLC obviously seeks to beef out the list of characters you can play as. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that at all, and I can't think of anything that could possibly go wrong with— oh yeah, on-disc DLC is a thing. Are you sick and tired of waiting hours for your small piece of downloadable content to download? Why not simply load them onto the disc that you bought in the first place but can't access because there's data on this disc that you can't touch yet because you must part with coin? Street Fighter X Tekken hit 12 DLC characters on the disc from day one, apparently because Capcom wanted a smooth transition when the DLC became available. I call chunky bullshit, and maybe don't do this and out yourself as a company who are just setting aside content solely so you can charge extra for it later. Just fucking don't. On-disc DLC is, and has always been, a really dodgy practice that can never be truly justified without the lingering shadow of corporate meddling to try and squeeze every last penny out of a title. And Street Fighter X Tekken isn't the first game to do this, not by a long shot, but it is a fighting game, and fighting games, as I mentioned before, it's really easy to do DLC for, so I am disappointed and saddened by your shenanigans. Worse DLC doesn't necessarily mean DLC that no one would buy. I mean, that's definitely a part of it, but you have to remember what a dick move it is to hide genuinely valuable stuff behind an optional purchase. I'll talk about this in a bit, but determining exactly how much value to give some DLC is a lot of work that most companies aren't interested in doing, and so sometimes you'll get something like Asura's Wrath, where yes, new episodes were set aside for DLC that filled in a few gaps and let you fight Ryu and Akuma as anger management class dropout Asura, and his many furious quicktime events, but also it's a bit more significant than that. I mean, that's cool, and I like that, and I'd like you to do that if you can, but also, I want you to not hide the true ending to a game behind the veil of DLC. That'll be great if you could not do that. I don't think I'm asking for much. In defense, the true ending to Asura's Wrath is so goddamn awesome that I think one of my testicles exploded once it really got going, and hey, I can't father children anymore, but at least I punched Psycho Buddha in the face so hard, he turned into some kind of crazy sex toy. I feel like I need to start by telling you how cool this DLC is, because I actually love this boss fight with all its ridiculous visuals and the fact that you do get a lot of stuff to do in this extra episode. But also, this is Asura's Wrath's true ending, and does provide adequate closure to a series of loose ends that were left over, and all in all, keeping this aside for paid DLC is a really shitty thing to do, and Capcom should be ashamed of themselves. 2 entries in, and all I've done so far is launch shit at Capcom for however many minutes we are in at this point, I'm not sure. I'm sure they're really concerned considering all the money they've been making recently without needing to slice their games up. Maybe they just learned? The best DLCs are superfluous and unnecessary, which makes for a very difficult balancing act because you want your additional content to add something of significance to the game so that it doesn't feel like everyone's wasting their time and money, but also you don't want it to be too valuable because then people complain that they need to pay money to access something so important. So it's a lot of work. How do you do it well? I don't fucking know. If that sounds complicated to you, that's because it is, and is as good a reason as any to maybe not bother with DLC in the first place. I feel like you're going to be judged either way these days for the contents of your downloadable content, so you should just keep your head down and pump out whatever you want because it's probably going to be shit regardless. That being said, if you're Bethesda and it's 9 years before you try and fail to charge people to install mods, and 12 years before you lost any integrity you might have had left, you are actually breaking new ground and being ridiculed in 2006. But at least your horse was protected from bad things. The 4th Elder Scrolls game was a mile ahead of its time in a lot of important areas, but specifically with the stupid, pointless DLC add-ons that seem to litter every other virtual store in the land. DLC wasn't exactly widespread in 2006, but what was around took the form of significant chunks of content that seemed wildly appropriate as a separate add-on that would persuade someone to spend more money on a game. Oblivion's Horse Armor was a watershed moment where Bethesda decided to charge $2.50 for a cosmetic that gave your horse some fancy clothes, at which point it was rightly shot down almost instantly for being a stupid dumb thing that is a waste of even a small amount of money. You'd have to be some kind of crazy person to do that, which must have happened a lot since cosmetics as DLC are incredibly widespread now, and no one seems to give a shit. Does it make the horse armor more okay because you can get different colored guns now? No, because maybe the world would be a better place if this didn't exist, and when we're seeing it as a history-changing event, I think it deserves its notoriety. But thank God my horse is safe. DLC takes on a completely different connotation when it's for a game that you're in love with. You'll forgive most shitty practices if it ends up helping you enjoy your favourite video game more, and people are generally more inclined to spend more on something that they are already enjoying quite a lot. Amiibos were huge for Nintendo because it gave fans some way of demonstrating how much they love Nintendo games, and also love using their money as a way of collecting Nintendo-themed figurines. Some people are okay with loot boxes if it goes some way towards improving the game they're playing in a way that isn't pay to win, and some people are perfectly okay with forking over literally thousands of dollars to gain access to everything in the average train simulator game. Because my god, how the fuck did we get to this? Every year for the last 4 to 5 years, there's always been some kind of article on a gaming publication or a post on Reddit detailing how much money you need to part with in order to afford every last tiny bit of DLC in this year's train simulator game. It's so much goddamn money that it doesn't really resemble DLC anymore and kind of resembles a down payment on a house. I'm not saying that it's not terrible, but I am saying that it's predictable. And it's a predictable thing that has been thundering along for years, despite a lot of criticism heading the way of developer Dovetail Games for allowing this to happen. The funny thing is that this isn't one giant purchase or even a series of slightly smaller ones. The scope of every train simulator is so large and detailed that these thousands of dollars worth of DLC are the culmination of absolute tons of additional features, like specific train types or being able to ride on a specific set of tracks within a country, like some of the more picturesque locations in Germany or the US. There's so much money that can be spent here because there's so much to buy, but I'm still not sure that's okay. It reminds me too much of all those mobile games filled with microtransactions where kids spent hundreds of dollars of their parents' money without knowing what they were doing. I see all of this and all I can imagine is some kid getting way too into trains and buying everything. It's like one of those Patreon tiers where they're asking for $5,000 a month for their firstborn child or something, and it just doesn't sit well with me. You've got to be aware of how to use this power responsibly, and hang on, is that a subscription link to my YouTube channel? I think it is, and apparently it's free, as is hitting the notification bell. This is quite the development which I feel I should care about, but also Train Simulator has too much DLC and needs to be stopped. More money is spent on this game than is spent on actual trains in my country. Yeah, English trains are a nightmare, am I right? Everyone gets that reference. The line between DLC and microtransactions can often be very thin at times. By their name, microtransactions are usually little purchases that don't offer access to any huge swathes of content, but instead a fast track to better weapons or easier progress. The easiest way to remember the difference is that microtransactions won't generally let you buy anything that you can't earn through other more complicated means, whereas DLC is typically reserved for actually new additions to the base game. Which potentially makes DLC easier to stomach until you start to unpack that and really get to grips with what can be cut from a game without removing anything too essential. Because apparently you can sell extra save slots these days. Metal Gear Survive is the disappointingly lonely birthday party of video games, and if I had any choice in the matter, I'd rather disappear inside my own arsehole than talk about this game, let alone play it. It's an entire video game built by a committee to maximize profits and relevancy, except it's trying to appeal to an audience that is about 5 to 10 years displaced in time, and no one cares. Outside of Snake being in Smash Ultimate, Metal Gear Survive is basically the only surviving example of Metal Gear in current popular culture, and it's one thing for that representation to be a cynical cash-in on outdated trends, but it's another for it to charge you extra money to save your game on a different slot. That's something a villain would do. And it's the weirdest goddamn thing in the known universe because it feels like a microtransaction for how simplistic it is and how you're not gaining anything too crazy for your money, but it's actually DLC because there's no way to get another save slot without paying real money for it. Games like Pokemon have only ever had one save slot in the past, so it wouldn't have been insane for Konami to simply not provide an extra slot for saving, but evidently they had dollar signs in their eyes, or maybe yen because they're Japanese, and jumped at a chance of squeezing an IP dry and wringing it out for every small bit of money they can get from it. I'm not mad, I almost admire the hustle. They'll be selling bathwater before the year's out. This is RabbidLuigi, and it's moments like this that make me appreciate how far we've come with saving technology, and before it was nowhere near being an expected feature, but nowadays it's something that companies feel they can charge extra for, and that is kind of insane and terrible. What it does to me, it makes me wonder what kind of automatic features we have now will be charged for in the future. I can't wait until it costs £5 to press the A button. Have you got a topic that you'd like me to talk about next week? Make sure you leave a comment about that down below because I'll be taking the most interesting suggestions and making a poll on the next video. In fact, here's one right now that I prepared from last week. I'll be revealing the winner of the poll on Twitter and taking suggestions for games to talk about that are related to that topic. So feel free to follow me over there so we can keep in touch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.